I'm Caroline. I'm an associate member of Leicester Print workshop, and I've also got a screen print workshop that I'll be teaching hopefully in February next year. I'm here today to do a demonstration of a 2-colour screen print. So this is the design that I'm going to screen print. This is what it was originally like, and I've added a background. So it will work like this. But obviously in colour, in bright colours. So I've already prepared my photo stencil. If you're not familiar with photo stencils, basically the green is the stencil, that's what has blocked out the yellow mesh. Yellow mesh is where the ink's going to pass through. So this is my background, and I'm going to start by printing some backgrounds. But just to make it a bit harder for myself, I've decided to do a gradient. So first thing I need to do is tape over any gaps in the mesh. So you can see there's open mesh here, and at the other side I'm going to cover that with some brown parcel tape. And this tape that I'm using is one that I know I can clean off the screen afterwards. Sorry if you don't like the sound. It might get worse. So I'm going to tape up all 4 sides just to be on the safe side, because I know that I'll get ink probably everywhere I'm not supposed to. The screen that I'm using is quite small. A4 is really the maximum size it will print, but luckily my design is a little bit smaller than A4, so it should be fine. Right, just the last side. I try not to tape too near to the image that I'm printing. The tape can get in the way of the squeegee, so I really just want it enough tape to cover any gaps. So if there's any holes in my stencil, I could take them out on this side, but I've already filled them. So these were little gaps in the stencil. Right, so that's ready. Got this pair of hinge clamps on a board, and the hinge clamps will clamp my screen in place, and then I'll be able to lift it up. And they'll also keep it upright, which will help. Underneath, on my board, I've got a registration sheet. And that's what I'm going to print on first. So I just want to hold it in place to stop it sticking to the screen. Right. So I'm going to flood the screen first. So I just want to check that my squeegee is the right width for the image. It's a little bit wider than the image, it needs to be a few centimetres wider. Prop my screen up, and then I think I'm ready. So I'm going to do a gradient which goes from a bit of a darker green to a paler green on this side. And I've got 3 colours. I found that it works better if I'm not lazy and I mix 3 colours rather than trying to do it with just 2. So I should get quite a nice even gradient. Sorry, if you don't know what a gradient is, in about a minute, you'll understand. I should really be fairly careful putting the ink on the screen, because once it's on there, that's kind of what's going to print. So if I make any mistakes, I'll get the mistakes showing on the print. And things tend to move around as well, so, right. That's ready, the screen's secure. I can put it down now. No, I can't. I'm going to flood it. So I'm just flooding the screen by pushing the ink to the top. That means there's plenty of ink in the screen now to do my print. So the first print is just going to be onto the registration sheet. I have a squeegee at quite a fairly high angle and I'm pressing quite hard and just pulling across in one go. So when I get to this side, I've got to remember to push the ink back. Because it's a gradient, I need to try and line up the ink on the screen with what's on my squeegee. Okay, so should be ready now. So I've printed onto my registration sheet, and this is so I can work out where I want the print on my A4 paper. So the A4 paper will just slide under the registration sheet, and then I just decide where I want the print to go on the paper, and hopefully get it fairly central. Right, so that'll do, I think. So once the paper's in place, I need to be really careful not to move it. The registration sheet just drops down out of the way. And then I've got some pieces of thin card and masking tape to mark where the paper goes. Now, I'm not very good at paper cutting. I'm better at screen printing than I am cutting paper to the same size. So I'm going to mark 4 corners, and the paper's going to be different sizes. So I'll try and get one side in the same place each time. But I've also got my registration sheet, just in case things go badly wrong. Right, that's it. So my 4 corners are marked. The first print is going to be stripy, which I don't really want. So I've forgot something, haven't I? Right, okay. Forgotten about snap, as usual. Right, so I'm adding some bits of card to the screen to raise it a little bit so the paper hopefully won't stick to it. So, also I really want to get rid of those stripes. I want a more even gradient. So I'm going to print a few onto newsprint, and it's good to have plenty of newsprint in case I make any mistakes. I can just print them out onto the newsprint. The table's a little bit wobbly. Right. The stripes are starting to go. I'm going to do one more test print and then start printing on some better paper. different types of paper that I'm going to print on. Just some cartridge paper, and then some slightly thicker paper, and then the one that I would do my finished prints on is actually this ivory Fabriano paper, but I've only got 2 spare sheets. So I'm going to do a few prints on cartridge paper and try and remember to make sure they're lined up on the left hand side, because the paper is going to be slightly different sizes. So that's not too bad. It's quite dark at the bottom, maybe darker than I wanted it. But these are only test prints, so it doesn't really matter, as long as they give me an idea, and then I can do some finished ones. Right. So I'm just going to do 2 on the ivory Fabriano. That's not too bad. So one problem I usually have when I'm printing a gradient for the background is that things can turn out a bit patchy. It's working quite well today, but I'm only doing 4 prints. I think if I was doing more, I might start to have problems. So usually I only need to pull once for my print, but if the screen starts to block, I'll perhaps try pulling it twice. So I've got 4 prints that are not too bad. I am going to scrape all this ink off my screen, clean it, and then in about 20 minutes I'm going to print the next colour. So that's it for now. So my first layer is dry. It's taken about 20 minutes, and now I'm ready to print my second layer on top. So the second layer is this flower design. I've got my screen in place. I've already taped it up. I'm going to remember the snap this time. So for this second layer, I don't think I'm going to need as much snap. So I'm just adding 2 thick pieces of card to each corner. And so the snap is to raise the screen a little bit, because I don't want it flat on my paper. So you've got a little bit of a gap between the mesh and the surface I'm going to print on. And then hopefully, ideally, it will mean the prints don't keep sticking to the screen, but we'll see. So that's all set up, and like last time, I'm going to be printing onto my registration sheet first. Now, because this is a test print, I'm not 100% sure the colours are going to work. The plan is to print the flower in this kind of yellow ochre on the green background, but it may turn out that they're too similar and they don't work. That's kind of the point of doing some test prints first before I try and do a finished edition. So I've got, this time I've got a smaller squeegee because I'm going to be printing the narrower flower. So it's still a few centimetres wider than the image. And then I'm going to flood my screen and print onto the registration sheet. I've been very stingy with the amount of ink that I've bought today, so I can't make any mistakes. We won't be able to refilm this. Right, so that's flooded. and I'm going to print onto the registration sheet. So now I need to line up my first layer with the second layer, and this is where the registration sheet is like just essential really. To make it a little bit easier, there's a tiny bit of overlap between this green background and the yellow flower. When I've printed it, you might be able to see it a bit better. So that looks okay. Now I can get rid of the registration sheet, and again I'm registering the corners. I'm going to do all of them. If I knew my paper was all the same size, I might only need to do like one side or a couple of corners, but I know this paper isn't exactly A4. Right, let's see, could go wrong now. We'll see what the registration's like. So I'm printing on the stripy one, which was the one that I didn't really want anyway. So if anything goes wrong, it doesn't matter too much. Oh. So it's not bad, there's a few things stuck on the screen. So what I'm going to do is get rid of them next. So there's one, actually I think it's come off. So if anything does get stuck on my screen, I usually have some cotton buds handy to just wipe it off. And then lots of newsprint just to get rid of any mistakes. So I'm just going to do another one on newsprint to check it's all right, and then carry on printing on my green background. That's all right. So, hopefully this one will be better. So my paper, because I've got the registration marks, I can get my paper in pretty much the same place every time, but I am going to double check it with the registration sheet. Yeah, and this one isn't in the same place. So this is the problem with the paper being slightly different sizes. Right, that looks much better. Hopefully I can get these done now. Right, so I'm flooding my screen again, and then I'm going to pull this print. It's not bad. It's got a few missed patches, so I might have to try pulling the prints twice. That's a lot better. Right, so the registration's right this time. And I'm going to pull it twice just to make sure I get enough ink through. So it's just like going back to the top and pulling it again. Oh. Okay, so the snap isn't too bad. I don't know if you can see what's happening, but the paper is falling off the screen instead of sticking to it. Because if it gets stuck to the screen, it tends to smudge when you peel it off. And generally, because there's so little overlap between the two layers, I'll have to check the registration every time. I'm just going to go with this. I think it's slightly, you won't notice. So, yeah, so this one has misregistered a bit. I don't know if you can see, there's like a tiny bit of white showing, and there's a lot of overlap showing between the two layers. I don't really want that. So, I've only got one chance left now to get it right. This is my last sheet of paper. Right. Fingers crossed this one's going to be okay. I'm just going to pull it twice, just to be on the safe side. So, we'll see. Hopefully it'll be okay. It's not bad. Haven't got the corner, but you get the idea. And it doesn't matter too much. They're only test prints, but I quite like the colours. So I think I will stick with the yellow, but change the green, and hopefully do a finished edition of these sometime. So quickly, I guess cleaning up is pretty important with screen print. So I'm going to scrape off all the excess ink because that's reusable. And try and get as much off the screen as possible, which is why a palette knife is, well, a spatula is really handy for scraping off the ink. And it does get everywhere with the small screens, tend to get ink all over the sides. And then I can just scrape the ink off the squeegee. That can all be reused. And wash my screen. I've just got a sponge and some water and washing liquid. I need to clean my screen, and then hopefully all the tape will come off, and the screen will be fine to do the finished edition whenever I decide to do that. I think that's it.